So having a multi-effects pedal on your pedal board is never a bad idea, especially when it comes in such a small form factor as the HX1. While it may look pretty unassuming, there are a ton of features packed under the hood. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Kai and today we're going to be checking out the brand new Line 6 HX1. Before we get into it, I want to say that this video is not sponsored in any way as I purchased this with my own money. Let's get it unboxed. So what is the Line 6 HX1? If you're familiar with the Line 6 Helix devices, then this isn't going to be anything new or groundbreaking to you. I think I'm going to call this a single multi-effects pedal. You're only allowed to use one effect at a time, but it's got a plethora of different effects available. In fact, every single effect from the Line 6 Helix, as well as all of the previous M5 series, are packed into this unit. Essentially, this is just an updated version of the Line 6 M5. I own both the M5 and the M9 and love them both dearly, so this refresh is a really nice addition to the HX lineup. One thing I will say before we get into it, the HX1 doesn't have any of the amp and cabinet models of the larger Helix units. This is strictly effects only, and you can't load IRs. So I've already posted a full tutorial of how to use the pedal. I will be going over some of that stuff in this video, but if you want the deep dive, the link's in the description box down below. This video is more going to be a review, first impressions, and some tone demos. So Swiss Army knife is a term that's being used to describe this pedal quite a lot, and I believe that to be the perfect analogy. While something like the HX effects, for instance, may be an entire toolkit at your disposal, the fact that you can only use one tool at a time means that the Swiss Army knife nomenclature fits this pedal so much better. So for the tones in this demo, I'm going to be running through my orange Rockerverb 100. I've got the Mua GTRS S900 running into it. I'm going into the 2 notes Capta 8 load box and then into Miko 2 in my DAW. The HX1 is placed in 4 cable method, allowing me to run either before the amp's gain or after the amp's gain. I'll get into the routing of that properly later on in the video. The specific routing for the 4 cable method is something that stumped me, and I'll talk more about that later. So using this pedal is pretty simple, at least for the first 70% of the learning curve. The main effect knob will choose your effect. You can press and hold this to select the category and then let go and you'll be into that category. You can either scroll just using the effects knob or you can press it once to enter the list. Let's add the Bucket Brigade delay from the delays section and show you how this works. On screen you'll see me adding the Bucket Brigade delay from the delay section. So the 3 knobs at the top of the unit correspond to the parameters you can see on screen. Each effect will have 3 main parameters that come up on the home page, but then each different page will have different parameters that you can access by using the left and right page buttons. The 3 knobs at the top are also push buttons. Part of the reason I chose a delay is to show you a very specific feature for anything with a sort of millisecond sync or note sync. What we can do is we can tap the parameter button and it'll switch between these milliseconds and notes. Let's go for a dotted 8th note delay. The timing of the delay will now be related to the tap tempo button on the bottom right of the unit. While we're still talking through the parameters, holding any of the parameter knobs will assign them to flux controls, which I'll talk about later on. You can access the tuner by holding the bypass button and the tap button at the same time. Helix's tuners are always pretty good, so we'll see how this one works. Any of the buttons on the unit will exit you out of the tuner menu. Once we've got our preset set up how we like it, we can save it by pressing and holding the home button. Once we've got some presets saved, we can swap between them by pressing both of the foot switches at the same time. This will enter a preset scrolling view. You'll notice as we go through this that there are quite a lot of complicated multi-function buttons, and it does take a little bit of time to learn how these all work, but I'll leave a graphic up on screen for you to quickly reference them. This is just the sort of price you pay when you scale things down to a pedal of this size, and you know, I'm glad that they sacrifice the usability somewhat in favour of versatility and power. This pedal is clearly well thought out, and it's only really taken me a day to fully understand it, so I wouldn't say it's a difficult learning curve whatsoever. So as I said previously, there is one strange quirk with the 4-cable method specifically. This really stumped me to start with. Firstly, I'll leave a graphic up on screen in case you wish to set yours up in 4-cable method, but this doesn't tell you the whole story. So once you've got it all plugged in, you need to head to the settings menu of HX1 and head to page 2. The settings menu can be accessed by long pressing the effects knob, and then the page 2 can be accessed just by hitting the page button. Here you'll see the I/O config and insert position features. If we switch the I/O config over to the insert, this is where you activate the 4-cable method. Now the insert position is what stumped me. You'll see we have two different options here, pre and post. Initially, I assumed this to be the position of the pedal in relation to the amplifier. So if you had it set to pre, it'd be your drives in front of the amp, and if you had it set to post, it'd be your wet effects in the amp's effects loop. However, it's actually the other way around. This pre or post is determining the position of the amp relative to your pedal. So if you want your amp to be before your pedal, you'll need to set this to pre, and if you want the amp to be after the pedal, you set this to post. This is very confusing to me, and it might just be for the language to be synonymous with the rest of the Helix line, but it really confuses me, even now, trying to dial in a preset and putting the delay on pre rather than post. It seems backwards, but I suppose it's there for other use cases where you're not specifically running in 4-cable method. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if you can think of any, please drop them in the comment section below, because this one's really confused me. Now, I like Helix Native a lot, but one thing that it's missing is the input impedance. This is the reason why the Helix Floor, the Helix LT, the Stomp, and all of those other devices tend to have better drive sounds than the Helix Native plugin. Fuzz pedals in particular are very responsive to the input impedance of your guitar, so hearing it on something like the HX1 is going to be so much better than hearing it on Helix Native. HX1 is also a lot more convenient, at least for my purposes, than Helix Native is. When I'm just writing riffs, I'm usually not in the full door with Helix Native. I'm usually running standalone amp sim plugins, or I'm running through my real amp. I mainly bought the HX1 for modulations after fuzzes for indie rock stuff, or maybe some drive pedals into the front end of high gain amps to tighten them up a little bit in the sort of typical modern metal fashion. I'll probably update in about 6 months to let you know where I'm at with this pedal and what I've been using it for. Let's hear the Pillars drive, which is their take on the Earthquaker Devices plumes into the high gain channel of my Orange Rock Verb. Okay, first let's hear the dry signal. Now let's see if we can tighten it up by engaging the pillars. So it's definitely quite noisy, but we have got a built-in noise gate in the settings menu of the HX1. That seems to have cleared up the noise nicely, so now let's try it again. that's pretty good. That's sort of what I expected of the pillars or plumes or however you want to call it. We need to talk about the new Flux feature in the HX1. I have a sneaking feeling that Line 6 are using this HX1 as a platform and a springboard to test out features for their new Helix product, whatever that may be. This has got the brand new Flux feature, which hasn't featured on any of the other Helix products, and it's also running on a different DSP chip. This Flux feature, as far as I understand it, won't be able to come to the other Helix products as it requires a certain sensitivity of the foot switch that the Helix products don't have. If you're a Helix user, you can think of this Flux feature as something like snapshots, with one main key difference that I'll get into in just a second. If you're not a Helix user already, essentially what the Flux feature does is allows you to determine two sets of parameters per effect, and then slowly ramp between them by using the Flux button. So for instance, if you had an overdrive set up with the drive down low and the level up high, you could have it fluxed up to a drive high, level low parameters instead. You can flux between them at a speed of your choosing, and you can also set the curve types. Press and hold the tap tempo button and the foot switch will turn white to indicate that you're in flux mode. Hold the parameter button down and you'll see two nodes pop up on the unit. These are your flux min and max controls for that specific parameter. What you want to do is tap each of the parameters you'd like to control with the flux control, set your first set of parameters, hit the flux button, and then set the second set. Okay, so I've now got that set up, so let's hear it in action. Firstly, this is on the clean channel with it bypassed. Now we're going to add the pillars. Now we're going to tap the flux button and it will swap between the two presets that we've created. Now this works for every single parameter that you can configure on the unit. This means that you can set tremolos to change the speed, you can set delays to change the amount of feedback and repeats, you can set anything you want however you want it. The flux controls go way deeper than anything I can cover in this demo, but if you'd like to see a full rundown of everything the flux controls can do, please let me know in the comment section below and I will get to it. The flux controls can also be configured via an expression pedal using the TRS jack on the right hand side of the unit. I currently don't have an expression pedal to be able to test this, but this will be particularly useful for things like the poly wham block. Let's hear what that would do first. So yeah, the flux feature is incredibly useful and I'm going to get a ton of use out of it. It's a great way to pack in that expression pedal-like control in a unit of this form factor without having the full bulky expression pedal attached to it. This is absolutely genius and, you know, incredible props to Line 6 for this one. I love it. So unfortunately, I do have to touch on some of the gripes I had with this unit. The first minor gripe I have is that it's not particularly user-friendly. I think once I'd created the reference sheet of all of the different commands that I can do with it, that really helped me out and sped me through learning how to use this unit, but for a lot of people getting it in their hands for the first time, I think they are going to get stuck quite quickly. The first 70% of the learning curve is nice and smooth, and maybe most users are probably going to stick here and be perfectly happy with what the unit has to offer. However, I do think some of the features, especially like saving presets and that, are more complicated than they need to be. Now I know it's complicated to pack that all in with a pedal of this form factor, but I do think a dedicated save button would have been useful. Again though, I definitely prefer usability over convenience. That step between an HX1 noob and an HX1 power user may not be the easiest, but it's far from impossible. While we're on the topic of the learning curve, I'm going to pull that graphic back up on screen for you to reference again. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense now that you've seen through the unit. Now, trails are something I think people are going to be pretty unhappy about. You don't get perfect spillover between blocks. So for instance, if I switch from a reverb block to a delay block, that reverb trail will cut off. This is because the unit doesn't have the capability to load both of the effects at the same time. I guess this is in the interest of keeping that power draw down, and also for the people that don't use trails, they would then be asking for the two blocks to be accessible. So one thing I expect them to fix in a future update is the volume balancing, specifically through the drive pedals. I noticed as I was scrolling through the list, some of them were ear-splittingly loud and some of them were too quiet. These disparities, while it doesn't really make too much of a difference to me running through a load box, if I was running through the speaker, that would be a serious problem. I think personally I'd be tempted to run through each of the drives in the unit and set my own new user default for each one to balance these volumes out a bit. Another minor issue I have is that there's no indication over the legacy effects in the unit. These are the effects that aren't exactly Helix grade, but rather ported over from the Line 6 DL4 and the M series pedals. And I suppose Line 6's mentality on this is that they want people to use their ears rather than their eyes to decide whether or not they want a certain pedal. I just think for my sake I would have preferred to have seen the legacy effects noted by a little sort of character. That said, I do see the benefit of having it as it is, since some of the legacy effects still hold up today. Let's hear one of these strange legacy synth simulations that were in the M series of pedals. Now, a big point of contention over this pedal is going to be the price point. At £250, this is clearly over double the price of the Line 6 M5. However, after accounting for inflation, it's more like sort of 1.7 times the price. Now, I don't see this £250 price tag as a negative in any sort of way. If Line 6 wanted to, they could have released a dedicated reverb pedal, a dedicated delay pedal, a dedicated pitch shifter pedal, each one priced at sort of £200 to £300 to compete with the likes of Eventide, Strymon, Universal Audio, that sort of crowd. I don't think Line 6 are about that, and instead they put the Helix models in the HX1, and people are still mad about the price for some reason. Now, I understand that some of the effects in the Helix aren't to the grade of the other competitors in this area, however I don't think there's really that much in it. Let's hear one of these Helix grade reverbs. I'm going to go for the dynamic plate. So in conclusion, I think the HX1 is a big win for Line 6. If you're like me and you just need one extra pedal for those random situations where you might need a chorus, a ring mod, a pitch shifter, or anything else that isn't enough for you to get a dedicated pedal for it on your board, but sometimes you want to experiment with it, then the HX1 is going to fit those briefs perfectly. It's just generally a lot of fun to use, and you're not being sort of forced into the Line 6 ecosystem like you would be with something bigger like the HX Effects, the Helix Stomp, or the Pod Go, for instance. Now, I do think this pedal is going to find its place in the market. If all it does is replace the Line 6 M5 on session players' pedal boards, then it's still going to be a massive success. I know that a lot of people are going to say that this is priced too high and too close to the HX Stomp, for instance, but the pedalboard friendly form factor is something that you just don't get with the Helix Stomp. I know that the Helix Stomp works well on pedal boards, but this works even better. The 9V 500mA power requirements mean that you can run it off of pretty much any power supply that you've got. For me, I can just run it off of one of the 500mA outputs on my Harley Benton power plant, and it should run just fine. With the HX Stomp, for instance, you'd need to run the current doublers, the barrel conversions, and jumper 2 different ports together. Now, that's not super easy to do, and it's quite a convoluted process, while the HX1 is simply just plug in and go. Another thing I'd like to mention is that the future of the HX1 already looks bright. Since the announcement of the HX1 and the actual release, which is, the past few days, there has already been an update. The 3.70 update that came to the other Helix devices is also compatible with the HX1. This means that you get some of the new effects like the feedbacker, the prize drive, and the non-linear reverbs. It seems to be on the same update schedule as the Helix and the rest of those devices, so I imagine we'll also see some more Helix updates in the the future. And as we know, with every update, this pedal is only going to get better, and I'm already really loving it. So for the final playing demo, we're going to hear the non-linear reverb into the clean channel of my rocker verb. So that is everything for this video. I'm going to be dropping a lot more HX1 content in the coming weeks, so be sure to drop me a subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future uploads. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this pedal in the comment section down below. Since this pedal is a bit of a hotly debated topic with a lot of people very angry about it, I please ask that you keep things civil and respectful in the comments. So if you've purchased an HX1 pedal for yourself, you're going to want to check out my tutorial video on it to get everything set up exactly how you want it to be. There is a link on screen for you to check that video out now, or I'll also leave the link in the description box for you down below. That's everything that I've got for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Kai.